INEC retrieves all sensitive election materials nationwide. National Assembly postpones resumption of plenary by a week. ISIS faces collapse as Syria Democratic Forces drives it almost totally out of Syria. And in sports, Mali emerged Africa Under-20 champions. Nigeria finished fourth.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says it has retrieved all sensitive election materials already distributed in most states of the Federation before postponement was announced on Saturday. It says this is to ensure the materials do not fall into wrong hands. The materials were distributed last week in preparation for the elections that were to have taken place on Saturday. INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu says the postponement would afford the electoral body the opportunity to address identified challenges in order to maintain the quality of Nigeria's election. INEC's action addresses concerns raised by prominent civic groups like the Center for Democracy and Development and the Inter-Party Advisory Committee about the safety and integrity of already distributed materials such as result sheets and card readers. The Independent National Electoral Commission says it will decide today if parties can resume open vote canvassing. Political parties are adamant on moving ahead with campaign rallies despite INEC's directive against such activities. The Electoral Act of 2010 stipulates that political campaigns must end 24 hours to an election, and a fine of 500,000 naira is stipulated by the Act against any party that violates such provision. While the Act does not address when an election is postponed. Two previous general elections were also postponed in 2011 and 2015. The elections were now held on Saturday. The Nigeria Airspace Management Agency has confirmed that the airspace would remain open during the general elections. The agency says it has put in place appropriate contingency measures to ensure safe flight operations within the period, as well as a possible extension of operational hours of any domestic airport if the need arises. The agency says airline operators, the traveling public and other service providers can proceed with their normal business schedules. Millions of Nigerians were to have headed to the polls on Saturday to elect the country's next president, but the national election has been delayed till Saturday. Though many remain hopeful about the security situation surrounding the poll, many of the 43 million registered voters, particularly those from the younger generation, still have faith that the election will bring them a brighter future. ANN's Lucy Adeyemi reports.
In the heart of Nigeria's commercial city, Lagos, many of the street vendors doing business are between 18 and 35 years of age, and they sell everything from clothes to food and accessories. Prior to the rescheduling of the election, the expectation of these young entrepreneurs was high, as they hope the future government will help their businesses move forward. Chidios Mwali is a 27-year-old salesman.
The government to help us for our business, to supporting our business.
It is a sentiment echoed across Lagos, especially by the city's youthful population. More than half of this country's population are under 35 years of age. No wonder the two leading contenders for the top job, incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, have both targeted youth in their campaign messages.
Any person that wins, so that let the person be serious with us, so that it can do a good job for us. We need more job for Nigeria.
Let them provide a job opportunity for those people that have went to school and there's nothing doing.
Many experts and indeed citizens see the election as boiling down to one thing: the country's economic situation. But many of these young people say postponing the vote casts more doubt on their hopes to see a positive change. Lucy Adeyemi, ANN News.
The National Assembly has postponed resumption of plenary to next Tuesday. The clerk at the National Assembly, Muhammad Sani Omolori, says the postponement became necessary because of the shifting of the presidential and National Assembly elections to Saturday. The Senate had scheduled its resumption for February 19th, taking into consideration the elections that were to have held last Saturday, but the schedule had to be revisited as a result of the election. The appropriations bill was not considered before the Senate adjourned, but it passed the minimum wage bill through first and second reading. Saturday, 4 men of the Ondo State Command of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, were shot dead by suspected drug dealers. The incident happened over the weekend while the deceased were on duty at the agency's E4 checkpoint around Ikaro, Sabo Axis in Ose local government area of Ondo State via the Owo-Bini Highway. Sources say the gunmen on motorcycles armed with AK-47 rifles shot the drug enforcement officers and set ablaze the agency's vehicle. NDLA commander in the state, Haruna Dagara, said efforts were ongoing to nab the culprit. Ondo State has been recorded as one of the strong dens of the country drug barons who specialize in the cultivation of cannabis sativa, popularly known as Indian hemp. A senior Nigerian lawyer, Femi Falana, says he's filing a lawsuit against the federal government over alleged corruption in the award of a contract for the production of the combined expatriate residence permit and online card. Falana says the Ministry of Interior, the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, and the Nigerian Immigration Service will be joined in the lawsuit. The senior advocate of Nigeria accused the Minister of Interior, Abdurrahman Damazau, of illegally increasing the SEPAC fee from $1,000 to $2,000 in December last year. Falana had asked the Minister for Finance, Zainab Ahmed, in a petition to probe the contract between the Ministry of Interior and Contec after the SEPAC fee was doubled. He said asking the foreign nationals to pay the fees in US dollars is a breach of the 2014 CBN Act, which stipulates that the currency issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria shall be the legal tender for the payment of any amount. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, has directed banks to lift for 30 days the liens placed on bank accounts of alleged tax defaulters. FIRS explained that it took this step because of large numbers of defaulting taxpayers had besieged its offices in an effort to regularize their tax positions. In September, FIRS boss Babatunde Fowler had said the service was going after 6,000 defaulters whose bank accounts would be frozen until they pay up. KPMG, one of the big four auditors in the world, had accused FIRS of going draconian by directing banks to freeze accounts of suspected tax defaulters. Coming up, African stories, 40 persons remain trapped in Liberian gold mine. And later, international news, ISIS on verge of collapse in Syria, booted out of its so-called caliphate.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it known for your hand, that's Palasa phone.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In African stories, top military commanders of the African Union mission in Somalia said over the weekend that they had agreed to launch new targeted military operations against Al-Shabaab militants in Somalia. Amazon says the new activities will be implemented in 3 phases in an effort to flush the terrorists from their hideouts in the region. The Deputy Special Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for Somalia, Simon Mulongo, explained the approach at the end of a 5-day meeting of military commanders in Mogadishu. He said will consist of comprehensive operations in support of the Somalia Transition Plan and stability operations targeting Al-Shabaab hideouts and enhancing protection of population centers. Somali military officials said the planned military operations are part of the country's plan to implement a condition-based AMISOM troop withdrawal, handing over priority locations in Mogadishu to the Somali security forces, degrading Al-Shabaab and securing key supply routes. Kenya has recalled its ambassador in Mogadishu and ordered Somali envoy out of the country over alleged auctioning in London, avoiding gas blocks in Kenya's maritime territorial area that borders Somalia last week, a claim Somalia had denied. Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Macharia Kamal said the decision was taken after Somalia unilaterally auctioned off oil and gas blocks in contested maritime zones in the Indian Ocean. Lieutenant General Lucas Tumbo was summoned to Nairobi and sent away Somalia's ambassador back home for urgent consultations. The Somali government, however, said it regrets Kenya's decision to instruct her ambassador to depart Kenya without prior consultation. Foreign Ministry said in a statement on Sunday night that it is ready and willing to cooperate with Kenya in finding an amicable solution to the crisis that has caused the diplomatic tiff between the two countries. Rescuers in Zimbabwe have pulled out alive 9 miners from a flooded gold mine in Kadoma, 75 kilometers west of the capital, Harare, where more than 60 persons have been trapped for 4 days. The 9 are all younger than 24 years old, and fears are rising for 60 other miners trapped underground. Officials say dozens are still missing. So far, 22 persons are reported dead. Rescuers say casualties in the mine disaster could rise, and there are indications that more bodies could have been washed down shafts and tunnels. The government has declared the incident a disaster. In another mine disaster, Liberian authorities are still struggling to rescue miners who were trapped in a gold mine pit in Nimba County after soil suddenly collapsed on them last week. 7 bodies have been recovered and the number of fatalities is expected to rise. The government has declared Monday a national day of mourning. Fellow miners have been using their bare hands to remove debris in an effort to free at least 40 gold miners who have been trapped for a week. Liberia's National Disaster Management Agency said on Sunday the gold mine is inaccessible, making manual efforts difficult to reach the trapped. The agency says it has also arrested some illegal miners at the site who were resisting a team sent to restore order. Medical officials say at least 10 persons were believed to have survived the soil collapse have been treated for broken bones, cuts and dehydration. Medical charity Doctors Without Borders say it has suspended non-essential work in parts of Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo after unidentified gunmen abducted 2 of its local staff earlier this month in North Kivu province. MSF spokesperson in DR Congo, Francine Kongolo, says the agency has also decided to cut back its staff on site out of concern over the safety of its teams. Armed groups in troubled North Kivu province frequently adopt foreigners and Congolese nationals working for aid organizations. Authorities have reported another 8 deaths in 3 shootings in Goma in the country's east. Sudan's parliamentary committee that has the responsibility of amending the constitution that would approve a 3rd term for President Omar al-Bashir has cancelled its meetings. Sudan's state-run news agency SUNA says the meeting was scheduled for Sunday but had to be postponed for emergency reasons. It says a new date will be announced later. Sudan has been rocked by a wave of protests for 2 months now. Demonstrators are calling on al-Bashir to step down. Activists say more than 50 persons have been killed, but the government tally stands at 30. The president has vowed to run for another term, saying the country can only change leadership through elections. Al-Bashir seized power in 1989 military coup. When we return, international news, ISIS on verge of collapse in Syria, booted out of its so-called caliphate. And later, sport, Mali defeats Senegal to win AFCON Under-20.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and international stories. Islamic State fighters no longer have breathing room in their self-proclaimed caliphate that once covered much of Syria and Iraq. They are now beaten back to a small piece of land on the country's shared border, and they are not even comfortable there. U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces are pummeling them that they have begun hiding among civilians. They are encircled by the forces who are ready to declare victory and knock them totally out of the so-called caliphate. Spokesman for the Syrian Democratic Forces said on Sunday, Islamic State fighters are preventing civilians from leaving the area. They have closed a corridor from which nearly 40,000 residents have managed to escape since December. For weeks, the militant fought desperately for their territory, which has shrunk from roughly a third of Syria. Syrian's Democratic Forces officials say IS is now down to a small village with tents. The capture of the last pocket of IS territory, either Syria or Iraq, would mark the end of a 4-year global campaign to crush the extremist group's so-called caliphate, and that could happen in a few days. Shamima Begum, the British teenager who fled with 2 other schoolgirls in 2015 to join the terror group ISIS, has given birth to a baby boy in Syria and now wants to return home. Britain is now in a fierce debate about how to deal with Begum's desire to return to the UK. Questions are being asked about how to deal with citizens who joined ISIS and now want to leave Syria as the group is about to collapse. In a TV interview, Begum said she did not know what she was doing at the time and would now want to take her child back to Britain with her. Her legal status is not known right now, but should she be allowed to return to Britain, Begum could face charges for supporting ISIS. Many in Britain say Begum has not shown any remorse and that she could or would be a security threat to the country should she be allowed to return. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and U.S. Vice President Mike Pence are now on opposite ends of the post when it comes to the Iran deal. Merkel defended Europe's multilateral approach to global affairs and the continent's decision to stand by a nuclear deal with Iran. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, on the other hand, doubled down on America's criticism of Europe. Merkel and Pence were speaking at the Munich Security Conference, an annual gathering of world leaders and top global defense and foreign policy officials. For days, there had been acrimony between the U.S. and Europe over Iran. Merkel says Europe's split with the U.S. over Iran's nuclear deal is an important channel to Tehran. Pence says the deal only delays when Iran might be able to build a nuclear bomb. U.S. Republican Senator Marco Rubio has visited border staging points for U.S. aid to Venezuela on Sunday and warned soldiers loyal to Socialist President Nicolas Maduro that it will be a crime against humanity if they do not allow U.S. food and medical aid items to enter Venezuela. The U.S. senator was met by an enthusiastic crowd of Venezuelan migrants at the border town of Cucuta, Colombia. The shipments of food, medicines, and personal care items are expected to be moved into Venezuela on Saturday by supported of congressional leader and self-declared President Juan Guaido. He is recognized by the U.S. and dozens of other countries as Venezuela's legitimate leader. Head of the Polish Prime Minister's office, Michał Dworkin, has said the planned trip by Polish officials to Israel may not happen because of remarks credited to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Poland may have been colluded in the Holocaust. Polish Prime Minister had called off his visit to Israel and delegated his foreign minister to undertake the trip instead. But now the whole visit may now be cancelled as the diplomatic row deepens. Dworkin described the Israeli statement as disgraceful and said Polish representatives may not attend the V4 summit in Israel. The V4 summit in Israel was a planned gathering of leaders from Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary. Up next, sport. Mali defeats Senegal to win AFCON Under-20. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, Lindsay, you alright? Keep walking down, keep walking to the left, yes?
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. It's a wrap on this year's Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations as Mali beat Senegal on penalties in the final to win their first title. Mali had defeated Nigeria in the semi-finals to get their first Under-20 AFCON final, where it did what it did to clinch the championship title in Yamé, Niger. South Africa finished third, while Nigeria held the fourth slot. The Federation of African Football Presidents, Ahmad, has responded publicly for the first time to the criticism leveled at him by CAF Executive Committee member Musa Beliti of Liberia. Earlier this month, Beliti resigned from 2 positions within Africa's football ruling body, saying he could no longer work under a president who Beliti claimed was leading the organization in the wrong direction. Ahmad responded that of the 23 Executive Committee members, it's only 1 or 2 who are talking. Beliti had written to his fellow CAF Executive Committee members, urging them to assess Ahmad's decision to redistribute the 2021, 2023 and 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. Ahmad insists CAF made the right decisions to reallocate the hosting rights of the 3 tournaments. Ahmad said CAF can no longer market its own rights and that the Executive Committee is consulted on a regular basis. Ahmad further said the status of the CAF obliged him as CAF president to organize 2 executive committee meetings every year, but that he had organized 3 or 4 since assuming office. That's CNN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CNN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.